Meeting is
Okay.
Hi, Esteban. Hi, guys.
Hi, Jerry. So let's get started. In today's hyperledger Identus outreach call, as you can see, there is something different in today's initial slide. So we will talk about that. As usual, remember the antitrust policy notice and as well to adhere to the hyperledger code of conduct during this call. So for the agenda of today, well, introductions, but I think that there is no one new around here. These are usual subjects. We are going to have a few updates, and then we are going to have a community spotlight from Bjorn, who will be presenting the analytics platform. And finally, as usual, we are going to have a Q&A. So, yeah, there is no new participants. So as you can see, now we have a logo finally for Identus. This was posted a few days ago by Peter. We presented a few options. Initially, one selection was about the color scheme, and then afterwards, another different logo was presented. But in the end, this one is the one who was chosen. So yeah, this is going to be the logo for Identus coming forward. And yeah, basically that's it. As I understand, there is some meaning behind the logo. I think it's explained in the PDF that was posted on the Discord channel. So you can take a look at it if you want. Next update. Well, as you are 100% aware, we are an Hyperledger project. So this is an invitation for all of you to join the Hyperledger Discord, because eventually we are going to start moving a little bit of the conversation from the Atala Prism Discord into the Hyperledger Discord for things related to Identus. So I think, yeah, Fayad posted in the chat the link to the Hyperledger Discord. So in there is right now there is only one channel that is called Identus Maintainers. So that's where you can post messages in there. Part of the idea of this is, well, initially to have our presence within the Hyperledger community, given that we are an Hyperledger project. And also this gives our project a little bit of let's say interaction with other Hyperledger projects that are part of the Hyperledger umbrella of things. So you will see that things like Anon creds are part of this same Discord server, things like Hyperledger Aris as well. So I think that will be good to start having interactions in that forum. Any questions so far?
Just one small one. So what type of discussions should we start using the Hyperledger Discord for?
So if it's related to Identus, Hyperledger Identus, then ideally it should take place in the Hyperledger Identus channel. I understand that it's a little bit messy because we created all these structures and all this community that is already present in the Tala Prism Discord. But for topics that relate explicitly to Identus, it's better to have it in the other side. So the idea is to keep things where they belong. So things related to Identus into the Identus side, things related to Prism into the Prism side. I know that Prism is a little bit not much to talk about right now. Eventually, we are going to have things to to share with the community that are going to be specifically Prism or Atala branded. So that will belong to the Atala Discord. But basically that's the idea, to keep each thing where it belongs.
So, quick question. So, for example, I know the agent or cloud agent is basically the main project that moves into Hyperledger, but everything else like mediator, the wallet SDKs, all that is still Atala Prism, right? It's not going to be part of Hyperledger.
That will be part of Hyperledger, just that we haven't finalized some formalities for that to happen.
Okay.
But the scope of things that are meant to go to Hyperledger Identus are the cloud agent, the 3 SDKs, and of course the documentation, and cryptographic library,
Mediator.
mediator as well, the Apollo library. So
Okay,
that's.
and what about the node? The Prism node is I think is the only thing that it's not open source yet.
So it's not open source yet. The idea is to make it open source. I don't know yet if we are going to move that one to Hyperledger, or if that is going to remain within IOG GitHub. It's going to be open source. That's the intention. But the thing is that there are other plans regarding node capabilities for Identus. So we will see. I think there are a few things to clarify yet on that matter, but at least it's going to be open source. That's for sure. If it's not in Hyperledger, it will be open source in IOG GitHub.
Oh, okay, so eventually everything will move under the Hyperledger umbrella, except for the node, which is not clear yet. But everything else I hear it's going to be moved to Hyperledger, right?
Yep, that's the scope.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay. So the other topic is related to the we need to create a technical steering committee for the Identus project. Basically, when we start this process of becoming a Hyperledger thing, they give us some guidelines of how to proceed. So they shared with us a technical charter. Basically, it's a document, a file that has some basic guidelines of how the project will operate, some guidelines related to IP policy, and also includes like some basic guidelines of how to form a technical steering committee for the project. So this technical steering committee, as it is stated in the document, is going to be composed initially by the project committers. So in this case, if you are listed in the maintainers.md file of the Identus repository, that means that you will be automatically part of that steering committee. That basically includes all the IOG resources that have been contributing to the project in the past. That also includes Bjorn, and that also includes David Poltrak. I will be sending an email specifically to the people in that list with a link to the document, so you can check it out and make comments if you find something that you need some some clarification or well, comments in general. This is like the initial project charter that we start with. Afterwards, if we decide so, the charter can be redefined or modified. And for that, we will need to do basically some sort of voting. But the idea is that we get an initial draft, or an initial, well, it's not a draft, an initial starting point for the charter. and then we can modify it if we find something that doesn't fit our needs. And yeah, I will be sending an email to the people on the list, and you can comment on there. Any questions about this? Okay. So I think we are good. And now, Bjorn, you can take the presentation. Let
Hi.
me
So, yeah,
try to stop myself from presenting.
okay.
Okay.
Let's see. Now I can only share whiteboard. I don't think I can share the screen. Do I need separate permissions for that?
You know, I'm going to give you some permissions now. Let me know if it's different. Go radio co-host.
So is it like sharing portion of the screen? Is that the option? I'll try it. So let me see if that works. Just a second.
I can see, but the portion is so small. Like you
Ah,
said.
yeah, that's interesting. Can I also share the full screen? Because I don't see any options for that.
Can you try stop sharing and then reshare again?
Yeah. So I still only have the option to share a portion. Yeah.
Are you selecting advanced or basic?
On basic, I just have the whiteboard, and on advanced, I just have portion of screen.
That's strange. Do you want to try exiting and coming back, Bjorn, and see if that helps?
Yeah, I could try that. So I still have the option, only the option to share a portion of the screen. So maybe. So you see mostly black, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
We see like two squares.
That's strange. That's an
It's
interesting
really
option.
strange.
Yeah. Okay. But I don't have any other option here.
Bjorn, are you using?
But the squares even don't make sense.
Yeah,
Like,
I
that's
see
not
a
showing.
small preview, and
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be a bit broken.
A little bit just.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't have any options here, it seems.
So on the basic, there's only portion, and on the basic, there's only whiteboard,
Yeah,
and on portion, advanced is only portion of screen.
yeah, that's what I'm seeing. And for portion, you mostly see black.
Are you using the browser?
And now I'm using
Zoom?
the app, I believe.
Okay, I think the browser works better. Not
Okay,
me.
I will try the browser there. Let's see that.
Stage.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't have that option to only show a portion.
So that is not the
But
stage.
he mentioned he was doing whiteboards or
Yeah,
sharing the screen.
when you select share, there's the basic tab and the advanced tab. Under the basic, there's multiple options.
So now that looks better. I'm signed in with the
There
browser.
we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Now
so,
we see everything.
Thank you,
Cool.
Fabio.
Okay. So I won't be talking about the analytics stuff. So you see something at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I won't be talking about the analytics. I will be talking about something different. I've been working for quite some time, and that's the analytics platform. So I give you a brief overview with a few slides, and then I jump into a demo. So what's the analytics platform all about? First of all, it's an immutable data store. So what data, make the mouse a little bit bigger. So what data can you store? You can store identifiers in it. So that could be any identifier, any ID, any URI, but of course DITs. And first of all, Prism DITs, so I'm supporting Preport and Mainnet, but I'm also supporting a lot of different indie chains at the moment. And hopefully in the future, some other DIT methods as well. So I'm storing identifiers. I'm also storing credentials and presentations. At the moment, I'm supporting W3C credentials in JSON and JWT format. And hopefully in the future also anon creds, and maybe I will go the carry pass and support AIDs and ACDCs as well. And also I store metadata in the platform. So what this could mean, I will explain a bit later. So it's a data store. So when we talk about data, we can talk about public data and private data. So first of all, public data. What's public data you can put in the analytics platform? So there's different kind of public data out there. There's like public ledger data that could be DITs being published to some chain. That's of course related metadata to the DITs, like publishing metadata, the block ID and so on. And also there, at the moment, there are some credentials out there which are public. For example, the British Columbia org book or open badges, and there are more coming. And also there are related information like status lists, schemas, registries, trust registries, JSON LD contacts, so other information which is out there in the public, and of course any kind of OSINT information. All this is basically either resolved, collected, or scraped. So this is information I can provide as a data provider. And the other side is private information. This platform is a tenant-based platform. This means you have your own private data. So you have your own credentials, your own presentations, your own published, unpublished DITs. Maybe you have some business data or metadata. When I say you, I mean you as a business which relies on SSI and maybe, or quite surely, something SSI related or decentralized identity relating is passing through your system. So when you have an API and maybe someone can sign into your service, you are seeing other DITs. you are seeing other credentials, you're seeing other presentations. So you are dealing with them in some way. And you can collect this information and you can put this in your private data repository. So, and this is all ingested through endpoints. So when you set up your own tenant, you get endpoints, and there you can send this stuff you collect. So, okay, then what? So we have a lot of data collected. We say it's public and private. So to give a few examples, so the data, the public data is mostly likely data I provide. So I scan all the blockchains. I go out and fetch the trust registries and provide the data to you. But also there are like other public data feeds. It could be commercial data feeds, for example, to get historical DNS records, to get IP geolocation, or to get any kind of OSINT data, which you can use to enrich the already existing public data or to investigate deeper. So on the private side, this is, as I mentioned, maybe you're running a service and you're collecting data from a sign-in service, or maybe you have like some API gateway and you collect data this way. When we have now all this data, you can have sessions on top of this data. So you have now a small data pool you define. You say, okay, I want to use all the public available data, but also I want to use data which I've collected in certain API endpoints maybe, or in applications I run. So then you can have an analytics session on top of that data. And there are 3 different kinds of sessions I am envisioning. The first kind of session I already built and I will demo later, and the other 2 are more theoretical at the moment. So what's the first kind of session? The first kind of session is a graph view. So in a graph, you can draw the relationship between identifiers, or DITs in general, or other way around, or credentials or presentations. So when you look at this simple image, you would, for example, have like a credential here. On the right side, you will see the subject of the credential. On the left side, you will see the issuer. And you can paint a graph on the relationships. When the ecosystem is bigger, the graph, of course, is bigger. And you can have also like additional data here that could be, for example, like schemas, JSON LD contacts, or for example, trust registries. So what can you do with such a graph? You can add new nodes, you can remove nodes, you can search for nodes, you can compare data, you can annotate data, and you can do version tracking, or even like have a look at the same diagram maybe 2 weeks ago where something looked different because there was a key rotation, for example. So that's the first kind of session. The second kind of session, which isn't there yet, is a sequence diagram. So in a sequence diagram, you can see basically what happened when, what information was accessible to whom at what point of time. And when you look at this, I mean, you basically know, like when you have a credential, you usually have like an issuing date, maybe you have an expiration date. For the DITs, you have like a creation date, and you have maybe key rotations, and you can build a sequence diagram. But this is still quite boring. But it really gets interesting when you enrich that data with metadata. That could be metadata you collect from your endpoints. So when exactly did someone hit your API, for example. Also, you can use, like when you're running, for example, a DITCOM mediator, you can collect all the metadata, put it in here, and have a sequence diagram of what happened when. And while the first type of session is suitable for maybe a few hundred nodes, this diagram doesn't work if you have like hundreds or thousands of nodes. This maybe works for a few dozen to really understand what's going on. And therefore, I envision a third diagram, and I acknowledge that's still a bit fuzzy, but I'm not there yet. And this diagram is about how to deal with really large amounts of data. So when you're really an ecosystem provider and you're dealing with millions of DITs or credentials. So for example, when we look at BCGov, I think like in the org book, you have about 8,000 entries each day. So you're dealing with a huge amount of data, and then you use this session type to really hone in and decide what you really want to look in detail. So these are the 3 session types. As I said, I just will show the first one in demo, but I will quickly talk about one other thing, and this is data processing. So when you have a session open, what you can do, you can take data, and I will show that later. Maybe you have like a credential lying around in a JSON format, and you can just basically drag and drop it into the session, and it will lay it out how the session, how the different nodes will interact. But what you can also do, and I said this earlier, like you have ingestion endpoints. So maybe you have your own backend service, and which is running, and people are interacting with your service, and it's collecting the data, and you can just send them to the ingestion endpoint. One thing, so this already works. One thing I'm currently thinking about is instrumentalization of SDKs. So you can imagine like you have like an Identus SDK, or could be also like AckerPie. Most likely we'll start with Identus SDKs, and you build instrumentalization for it. So in your product, you would not only use the Identus SDK, but you would also use an instrumentalization SDK, and this would fetch the data which is passing through your SDK and send it to a configured ingestion endpoint. So then you can grab all the timestamps and the credentials and the presentations and the DITs and whatever else you want directly from the application. And this relates also like that you can collect telemetry data or other metadata and send it to the ingestion endpoint. So then you have all your data here, and what you then can do is run it through different SDKs. So that could be, for example, for verification purposes. So let's say you ingested a credential, and now you want to see if this credential is indeed valid. So what I'm trying to do here is that you run containers of different versions of different SDKs and run it through those containers. So you have a credential, you run it through a specific like Identus SDK version, and that would result either in a verification, in a valid credential or an invalid credential. And you can do this with multiple SDKs. So you can also do like inter-op testing between different SDK types or DIT method types, and also between different versions. So you have Identus 1.31 and Identus 1.32, and you can run the same credential through both of them and see if they're pathing or not. So I've a lot of more slides, but I won't go through them all. Just as a summary, what is it or what is it not? It's not about issuing credentials. It's not about like creating, updating, deactivating DITs, all that stuff on the typical SDKs are doing, like Identus or, for example, AckerPie. It also at the moment has nothing to do with wallets, so neither DITCOM or not OpenID for VC. These features might come later. So in the end, it's just like an identifier, credential and transport agnostic platform to store, analyze, and visualize a large number of credentials and identifiers to gain insights and to process them in a data pipeline. So now we quickly jump to a demo. So this is a block trust analytics platform. It's still in the alpha phase and will stay there for quite some while, I guess. And we can go, like we have our own tenant here. And as I mentioned earlier, you basically have sessions and you have pools. So pools are your data pools. So we can start with like creating a new data pool. So I might have like a new data pool, and what I directly get is an ingestion endpoint. So I can use that and send credentials to it. So, and the pool is still empty, as we see here. And what you can also do is like set up trust registries. So I'm currently going with the trust establishment. Credential trust establishment, that's a diff working group, which have like a trust registry protocol. I will show that later, how this might look. And I set up the pool, and now I set up a new session. So I give this a name. Give this a name. And I can select on which data pool the session sits. So I use the public pool with all the publicly available information. Also, it sits on the pool I just created, and it can also like connect it to a trust registry. And then I create the session, and then I immediately open the session, and we see nothing since we haven't ingested anything. So what we can do is here different options, like to add a new DIT, like to add a DIT document, or like add a credential presentation. So I do have a presentation here. So that's a presentation. So just in the JSON format. So it's a W3C presentation. I'm usually working at the moment with the W3C example data. They have a lot of interesting scenarios, and this one is a scenario where it's about prescription data. And yeah, so we can just like add it, and you immediately see the graph painted on that. So yeah. So what do you see here? So this all follows a specific layout rule I have. That layout rule isn't perfect, and I'm still refining that layout rule. So for example, I have to move that to the left, but now I can explain a little bit what we are seeing. So first of all, we have a credential here. So in the presentation, I pasted the presentation, there's a credential, it's a prescription credential, so we can look at it. You see all the details, you can jump to the different nodes, you can copy, paste, whatever. You can also see the raw data. You can add tags and so on. And this has an issuer. So the issuer is always to the left of the credential. So we go here, that's the issuer. That's a DIT which couldn't be resolved. It's just an example DIT I have here. But this DIT, for example, is in a trust registry. So we can go to the trust registry. That would be even on the left again. This is my demo trust registry. That's point to a trust registry file, and you can see what's in the trust registry. You can see the participants. You have all those links. You can like disable them and enable them. But when you now look at the arrows, you see like the credential is defining the issuer. So the issuer is on the left. So it's upside down, the word at the moment here. But the issuer is to the left, and the subject is to the right. And the relationship between the issuer and the subject is defined by the credential. So that's the reason the arrows go this way. And when we look at the trust registry, the arrow goes this way because this DIT is inside this trust registry, and the definition goes this way. So in this example, we have like another credential. So the presentation contained 2 credentials, and the issue of that is this one. And so then you see like other things here. This is the credential ID, which potentially could be identical. Then it would, of course, detect it. And you have the JSON LD context. This is also the context for the credential types. This is also another. No, this is a credential type, and this is the JSON LD context, for example. And here on the top, you have the verifiable presentation, which contains both credentials, and it contains also the holder, since we it was defined in the presentation. It itself has, again, like contexts. So what you can also do when you look at those icons, you see, for example, here's a DIT which has not been resolved because it is an example DIT, and it differs from this icon. Here you see a DIT with an underscore and like multiple icons behind it, and this points to a DIT which has a history. So you can open this. It was resolved against like this is like a real Prism DIT on the Preport network, and you can go in here and you can go to prior versions of that DIT. So it highlights this in yellow that you're going back in time and see what happened like a year ago with that DIT. Yeah, so that's the basic how it works. So we can have also a look at other sessions. So that like here at the demo session, this also works with larger data set. I don't think it looks fluent when I display it on like with sharing the screen because it doesn't like do 60 Hertz, I believe, but it's really fluent and you can really work with large data sets and understand them. And you see like this is mostly like W3C example data, and you already get interesting relationships between those DITs and credentials. So these are just a few examples I've in here. There's also an example for the org-book and traceability example. This is a traceability vocabulary from W3C. You can do also like other stuff. So when we go like back to the session we had earlier, you can like search for DIT, kind of like DIT Prism, for example, pre-prod, and then like one or whatever letter. There is something. You can, that's a fuzzy search. You can like find all the DITs and like also like add a DIT, and when you add it, it immediately appears here. So that's a DIT, and I think I still have to reload, but then you can go into that DIT and see when it was resolved, at which block, and all the other nice details. That's where I am with the application at the moment. So then stop sharing. Any questions?
Several. That was great. I do have a few questions. So, okay, so before we jump into the questions, I don't know if you're aware of JSON Canvas, which was recently open sourced from Obsidian. It will help you draw those nodes. So do you know Obsidian, the software to create
nodes?
I
know that, yeah.
Okay, so you see that they have like a graph view, and they open source the engine to do those, and you define the nodes in JSON basically, and they draw that in SVG in a canvas on the browser, and it will arrange everything nicely, neatly. You can theme them. So maybe check that out because it will help you solve that specific problem of displaying large numbers of nodes on the screen. You know, you can zoom in, create clusters, like click something, expand stuff, etc. So maybe that will help a little.
I tried something similar at the beginning. So my first intuition was use a standard graph library. But the thing is, you just have a big ball of nodes, and you can't really display the relationship. So you have the relationships, of course, but you can't reason about them because you have just a big ball. And I found it to be more intuitive if I have specific layout rules. For example, like the subject is always to the right and the issue is always to the left. And there are some other layout rules to make it easier to reason about that.
Cool. All right. Well, it's open source, so you can check that out. Maybe because I can see how like it will be helpful for that. Maybe it doesn't work for you, but it could be cool. Okay, so I have a few questions. I like this solution a lot. The first one is, of course, how private it is, that data that you put in there. how is that safeguarded? Like what's going on in there in the storage layer? If we kind of want that, how do you host that, all that?
Yeah, so at the moment it's like a proprietary hosted platform. I mean, you can do like database encryption, but otherwise, I've not planned on like having on-site installations, but could be possible that you host your own database with the data. And one topic which easily comes up here is in general privacy. And I know what I'm doing is can be privacy critical, but this really depends on the data you're dealing with. So when you're dealing with mostly public data, that's not an issue. When you're dealing, for example, with supply chain data, that's also usually not an issue. But when you have like the instrumentalization SDK and you sneak that into a private wallet, then it's obviously problematic.
Right. Yeah, this is perfect for supply chain, for audit trail compliance, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So, but essentially you will provide, I guess, an SDK that you can attach to the Identus SDK so you can enable what to track and what not to track, or it's like once you put that, everything. No, but because you have to ingest the data, like you have to choose what to add. It's up to you, right? It's not like up to the library. Okay. Great. This also reminds me about, well, I don't know much about Midnight, but I think it could be, somewhat related in the way of, well, at the beginning I thought about that, but I don't know. I don't know enough about Midnight to kind of make a comparison with what you are doing about storing that data. But I think there could be some, stuff that can, if you put those two together, something interesting could happen in there. I'm trying to think about that. And also the other thing that this reminded me of was the DHT, the distributed hash tables, which it's like it's a DIT method that uses the BitTorrent protocol to resolve back, like you put something in there and everyone that advertises about that, the document or whatever hash, really, it's a hash that you resolve, you kind of look through all the peers and everyone that knows about that hash will kind of reply, well, every node that is replying, right, of that data. It's like DNS, or it's the way BitTorrent works, basically, when you try to find some file. So it could be interesting to kind of reply back with either ingestion points or resolved, cache of resolved relationships about that. And I don't know. It's a way to decentralize it's a way to resolve something from a hash in a decentralized way, basically, from a database that everyone shares. And when you put back in there, and everyone can advertise whatever on that network. But it could be interesting to find, because the minute that you show, oh, you put a date and then you see the graph about what happened to that date, all the relationships and all that, that's when it clicked to me like, oh, that could be also interesting, where you need to assert something or check some relationship or may kind of trail down the history of that thing, right? But you don't have an entry point, right? And so whenever you can advertise, hey, this is my date, and this is what I know about, or this is what this VC is doing or interacting with, not necessarily disclosing what is inside the VC, but the relationships with who's the subject, who's the, when are we interacting? Those kind of things are great on your platform where you can store that information. But if you don't have an entry point of something that is external, and you need to resolve where I need to look more about this, that could be an interesting way to solve in a decentralized way, because well, I don't know how you can query your stuff, right? That's the other question. Is like, okay, I can see that I can ingest data and I have this dashboard, but are there ways to query that and get something back?
Yeah, regarding querying, that stuff is coming. So you already have the search, and you can easily have like search criteria, but you also want to search through your collected credentials and presentations, and that's still not there yet. But otherwise, thank you, Roberto. I think these are interesting thoughts.
Oh, thank you. That was great.
Hey Bjorn, this is John. That is also super interesting. I was wondering if you thought about use cases for like testing scenarios. So for example, like I could see this being helpful in like automated tests. Let's say like in our platform, if we had automated tests running and they were all, with our own like repeatable test data, and we wanted to use like this sort of platform to just confirm that all of our test flows are working as expected. Obviously, we would have, the tests themselves would sort of say that, but if there were bugs, it would be awesome to be able to drill in and see, oh, where did something go wrong, and the relationship. So that's just an idea I had too.
Yeah, definitely. So that's not the highest priority item at the moment, but it's basically was what I was alluding to when I was talking about the data processing pipeline. So you can set up a pool with an API and then ingest the data, and then you set it up like to run through different versions of the SDK, and then you take the output either coming back through the response, or it would be like put into different data pools depending if it's verified or not verified. Yeah, but I'm definitely thinking about doing something in the data processing thing. Yeah, basically like ETL stuff.
Awesome. Cool. Awesome.
Oh, two more quick questions I forgot. Trust registries. So you mentioned trust registries there, right? So I assume that you can see like the history of the trust registry, like who entered, who got out, the evolution of that. So is that you're dealing with a particular trust registry standard, or what's
yeah, so John might remember at IRW we had like a discussion about trust registries, and there were like 8 or 9 different standards people were mentioning, and they were doing comparison. And the end is, I mean, there aren't any trust registries really in production. So there are some standards out there, there are some prototypes. And I just took the one from Div because it made sense to me, and I think it's quite far along in the process. So I just implemented that. But I mean, this is at the moment it's a lot of theory. As soon as we have a real or as soon as I have like a real ecosystem where I can deploy my solution, and this ecosystem has a real trust registry which is really in use, then you can build a lot of features around it. But at the moment, it's just for demo purposes.
Cool. And the last one, did you submit a proposal for this? I would like to vote for it if it's available.
No, it's not a proposal. So it was basically a proposal nearly 2 years ago. For it was called like block trust analytics 2 years ago, and this was about the thing I was showing earlier. So like the statistical view of what's happening on Prism Preprod and Prism Mainnet. And I also wanted to build like a simple graph solution in the proposal. So that's basically it. But maybe I will return to Catalyst for Fund 13 to advance
You
the
should.
solution.
Yeah. I will vote for it for sure. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have more questions? Okay. Yeah, I mean, it was impressive as usual. Every time I see something developed by Bjorn is very outstanding. I see a lot of uses, maybe from even if when you are developing and you're trying to troubleshoot the relationship between a credential and you have a complex DIT thing that you want to debug or understand what's going on, this is going to be incredibly useful, especially when we get to the point where we start to having real ecosystems with different players in there, and you want to verify, yeah, this DIT is the one who issued this credential and everything lines up. This is going to be as well very, very valuable tool. And also it's nice that you are considering, well, not only Identus stuff, but also things from India and other SSI solutions that are there as part of this. Because in the end, I mean, the ideal is that hopefully, kind of long shot, but for all these technologies to have some degree of interoperability, right? And I think this goes aligned in that direction. So yeah, thank you very much for demonstrating your tool today.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I mean, also like this is like I feel the pain as a developer, like when you have like a JWT of a presentation and something is not working, and it's really nasty to get to the reason, and so you can just paste it, and it makes it a lot easier debugging, and yeah, and interop is one of the main reasons to build this. Sure. Then it really makes sense if we have like an ecosystem where you have like a KYC credential on one DIT method, and you wanted to use it somewhere else, and then you have like all this like data forensics where you want to understand what has happened when, and yeah. The other main reason is like really when you have like large ecosystems, and even like large ecosystems at the moment, for example, the BC Gov, they don't have tools. They don't have visualization tools to understand what's really going on and how the relationships are working.
Awesome. Anyone else? No. Fayat, do you have anything else to add?
No, I've got nothing to add from my side, but thank you, Bjorn. That was an awesome presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
There'll be many more to come.
Yep. Thank you, Bjorn.
Okay, so if there is anything else, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And yeah, as usual, we have next week on Tuesday, maintainers call. And yeah, see you there.
So, thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.